As the pandemic rages on, the question on everyone's mind, what to do about Thanksgiving, plus a reality check on the election as Arizona is called by more networks for Biden, and love hate 8 to end another exhausting week. Here's what you need to know. Good morning. This is Cheddar's Need2Know podcast for Friday, November 13th. I am Jill Wagner with Carlo Versano. Hi, Carlo.
Friday the 13th, Jill. This has been an exhausting week. Is that just like the election hangover? I don't know. Is that just people in the news business feeling it, or is everybody just beat?
I think every week is exhausting these days.
Yeah, it really is.
Not to mention, I hate Friday the 13th, and 2020 is a year that has two of them.
Do you really? Oh, you have weird superstitions, don't you?
I do. I don't even want to talk about it, but yeah. So, of course, 2020 would have two Friday the 13th. Some years only have one.
That's good.
Okay, let's get straight to the news. Dr. Fauci telling Americans to, quote, double down on mask wearing and social distancing with, quote, vaccines on the horizon. But until then, the situation in this country is dire. Detroit is the latest city to close its schools, and the nation's largest public school system in New York City is on the brink of going full remote. Chicago has issued a new stay-at-home order that goes into effect Monday. The national caseload has gone from 100,000 to 160,000 per day. Those are new cases per day in just over a week. We're also hitting about 1,500 deaths per day from the virus right now. If you're wondering in New York City, the barometer that they're using to determine whether or not to shut the schools, if the positivity rate hits 3%, Mayor de Blasio says schools will close. We are at 2.6% now. And Carlo, some have argued, close the restaurants and the bars before you close schools. The schools should be the last thing that you want to close.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I don't think schools should really close at all at this point. They're not these big vectors of transmission. They're not closing them in Europe, and they seem to be managing. There is something a little weird about the priorities of keeping indoor dining open and schools closed. But of course, that has to do with the fact that there's no federal aid right now. But I did like this idea that was floated by Nate Silver, the statistician. What about having planned 3-week lockdowns for December, January, and February? So, you plan them out ahead of time. The rest of the time, the other week, you still do masks and social distancing and all the stuff we're doing now. But if you had these like planned 3-week chunks where everybody stays at home, non-essential businesses closed, then at least you could like plan around that. I don't think that's going to happen, but I just thought that was sort of an interesting sort of creative approach to how to get through the winter. I did want to mention one thing, Jill, and I linked to it in the newsletter today. It's pretty cool. Ahead of Thanksgiving, researchers at Georgia Tech have created this interactive real-time map that uses data analysis to estimate the risk that there's at least one COVID positive person present at any given gathering or function of different sizes depending on where you live. I don't know if that makes sense, but you can go play around with that. You can check on your county and see, what your risk is ahead of the holiday. Because this holiday, I think a lot of people are wondering what to do about it. I don't know if you guys have made your plans yet.
So we were going to attempt to do something outside with everybody, or even in a garage, and leave the garage doors open.
That's good.
But I don't know if we're going to do it, actually. I think I was talking to my parents yesterday. It might just be too risky. I think we might everyone just kind of do their own thing and do FaceTime and kind
So
of
depressing.
and do that. It's sad, but I don't know. It's terrible. Although I was talking to somebody from United Airlines on Cheddar yesterday, and he was saying that bookings are up. Like people are traveling this country
Really?
for the most part. Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of people are just over it, and perhaps maybe in the next 2 weeks they'll cancel their plans. But as of now, bookings are way up for Thanksgiving and also for the Christmas holiday. You mentioned the federal response. We have not heard from President Trump about COVID. Some political watchers have pointed out that he is on Twitter calling the election fraudulent, et cetera, and fighting for a job that he's not really doing at the moment, right? We need federal leadership. This virus is out of control, and we haven't heard from the president about it. So I do want to do a quick reality check on the election now that more networks, including CBS, NBC, ABC, and CNN, they've called Arizona for Joe Biden overnight. A committee of federal, state, and local election officials working under the Department of Homeland Security. They came out late yesterday and they directly contradicted President Trump's claims of widespread voter fraud, calling the election, quote, the most secure in American history. The Trump campaign continues to file lawsuits in several states that decided the outcome, but the legal pursuit just not really sticking because none of the lawsuits provide tangible evidence of any widespread fraud.
Yeah, that's true, Jill. Quickly on Arizona, just because you know the AP called it for Arizona on election night, but now it's pretty clear that they were right, even if they were a little early. Fox as well. Biden does become the first Democrat to carry that state since Bill Clinton in 1996, which is pretty remarkable. And also on that DHS report that you just mentioned, I want to stick on that for 2 seconds because it's really important. Remember, this is the federal government, right? This is the Trump administration effectively saying, refuting what he says. That they said, and they even bolded this in the statement, which I thought was a little bit interesting. Quote, there is no evidence that any voting system deleted or lost votes, changed votes, or was in any way compromised. I want to very quickly read an editor's note that I'm putting in today's Need2Know newsletter because we've gotten a lot of emails from people who are writing in and saying the election is still being decided. Joe Biden is not the winner. We just don't know yet, and taking issues with our characterizations of it being over. So this is what I have written in consult with our political director at Cheddar. For those who've sent questions about our use of the title President-elect for Joe Biden, we're doing so based on Cheddar's partners at the Associated Press, who have called the election for Joe Biden in the same way that Donald Trump became President-elect Trump on the election night in 2016, as soon as the AP called that election for him. As for concerns about the legitimacy of the election officials in every single state, red and blue, report no evidence of widespread voter fraud or election irregularities. And it may be natural to compare this election to 2000, but unlike that contest, which hinged on hundreds of votes, literally 500 or so votes in a single state, Florida, the 2020 electoral outcome involves thousands, even tens of thousands of votes across several states that provided the electoral college edge to Joe Biden, delivering him a decisive victory. So I just want to be, I know that our podcast listeners sort of understand this, but I think a lot of folks in this country are still under the impression that this is sort of up in the air, and that's the problem, Jill. The president. If you read the latest reporting from Maggie Haberman in the New York Times this morning, the president doesn't even actually believe that he won. He's refusing to concede for some ulterior motives, in some cases considering his post-presidency, which could be starting some sort of media operation. But he knows that whatever he decides to do, according to Maggie Haberman in the New York Times, he needs his base fired up, believing that he has had the election stolen. In addition to playing his people as marks, this is why it's so dangerous, right? Because millions of Americans are going to believe that this election was fraudulent because of what the president is doing. And like you said, maybe in another time when we weren't losing 1,800 people a day to this virus, it'd be funny or whatever that he's like owning the media and owning the libs. But it's not funny. It's embarrassing and it's dangerous. And we in the media have to push back on it.
So I've spent some time watching Fox News recently, particularly the nighttime opinion shows, and the hosts are still pushing this idea of widespread voter fraud. And they point to things like ballots that were sent to people who are dead, things like that. And yes, that does happen, and that's not right, right? And like we have to get to a point where there are individual mistakes that do not happen. Okay,
Right, sure.
and so I'm not condoning it. But just on this issue of widespread voter fraud or rigged election, that's not that, right? Like if one ballot gets sent to somebody who's dead, that's not a sign of a conspiracy. And I just want to give an example. And I've spoken about it here on the podcast. After all of my brouhaha trying to change my voter registration because I got married and I have a new last name and a new address,
Right.
I was actually registered twice one as my married name, and then
Right.
my parents got a letter confirming my registration with my maiden name at their house. So this wasn't some deep-seated, planned, orchestrated conspiracy by the left to get me to vote twice for Joe Biden. Okay. I realize I'm not in a swing state, but number one, I only voted once, right? So despite the fact that I could have, yes, technically gone to like both polling places and voted twice, I did not because I just A, don't have the time, and B, I'm following the law, right? So I voted under my legal name. And I'm actually not a registered Democrat. I'm a registered independent. Okay. And I'm only admitting it on this podcast because I just want to prove the point. Meanwhile, Long
Right.
Island actually went for Trump, right? So they, and I say this in parentheses, like this deep state could probably would have assumed I would have voted for Trump, which would have hurt Joe Biden. So again, it's a bureaucratic mistake, which happens and it's wrong, but it's not widespread voter fraud. It's
Right.
not a conspiracy to steal the election from President Trump.
Yeah. I mean, just think
And
about
that's a
how.
real life
Yeah.
example.
No, just think about how difficult it is to how big and diverse this country is. I mean, there's going to be mistakes, right? Mistakes get made. The human errors happen. That is not indicative of a conspiracy.
All right, so let's move on. If you don't have any plans tomorrow night, and come on, who are you kidding? NASA and SpaceX are going to be launching 4 astronauts to the International Space Station on Saturday in the 7 p.m. Eastern Time hour, contingent, of course, on the weather. So this is the first operational mission to launch from the United States since 2011, when the shuttle program ended. We've been hitching a ride with the Russians since then. And the SpaceX launch back in May was considered more of a demo. So the astronauts are going to spend about 6 months at the ISS. But Carlo, this is a huge milestone when it comes to bringing space flight back to American soil.
It sure is. God, talk about Elon Musk has had quite the year, huh? He is really firing on all cylinders, regardless of what you may personally think about him. But this is also the first time that we are cramming 4 people into one of these little capsules. I thought that was kind of fascinating. The Crew Dragon capsule, as it's known, it is sitting atop a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket right now on the launch pad at Cape Canaveral. And as you said, the liftoff is planned 7:49 p.m. Eastern tomorrow. So that'll be something fun to watch. Because again, to your point, what else do you have to do on a Saturday night?
And like the best of humanity, right?
Totally. Yeah. Absolutely incredible stuff.
All right, a team at Deutsche Bank is proposing a new and novel, controversial idea for employees who want to continue to work from home, at least for part of the week, even after the pandemic ends. So the team suggests that workers be taxed 5% of their salary for the days that they work remotely, which would go towards subsidizing lower income workers who can't work from home. The report argues that remote workers are not contributing to the infrastructure of the economy while still receiving its benefits.
Get out of here with this. Get out of here. No chance. Like, how about Jill, how about I get compensated from my, and I don't mean this literally, but like, how about I get compensated from my employer for the literal $200 a month Con Ed bill that I am paying? I mean, between me and my wife, we are running like a full scale newsroom out of this 600 square foot apartment. Our electric bill is through the roof. And I'm not like asking Cheddar to pay for it, but I mean, I wouldn't actually be opposed to a tax hike like this, so long as the employers paid it, right? Because it is true that working from home is decimating large swaths of the economy, especially in cities. I mean, you and I have talked about, like, the coffee guy that's not getting paid, right? The salad place on the corner. In a bigger sense, like the office space, right? But to make me pay a tax for the honor of not coming into the office, no thanks. I'm good.
Well,
I'm good on my
the
tax.
other interesting thing about it is that it's for even post pandemic. So
Yeah.
you could argue that if you're, if as expected, right? If post pandemic, if we can get there, if just the face of work is going to change, right? If people are going to be able to work remotely, even if it's 2 or 3 days a week, which is basically what Deutsche Bank is thinking will happen. Well,
Right.
the economy, and I'm talking about the coffee cart guys, whatever, is going to have to catch up, right? Like you're going to have to, the same way as people shop online, retail stores have to figure out how they're going to make it. you can't just tax people for their behavior and kind of subsidize an older way of doing things, right? Like eventually these people are going to have to say, oh, maybe I'll open up my coffee cart in a residential neighborhood instead, because that's where people are going to be working. I'm using
Sure.
that
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
just kind of at the
Yeah. Yeah.
top of
Yeah.
my head. Okay, if you've checked Instagram in the last day or so, you may have noticed a major redesign to the app's home screen. The Facebook-owned service has given more visible placement to its shop and Reels, which is basically Facebook's TikTok knockoff. So this is at the expense of the search and notification tabs. Instagram also getting a vanish mode that makes messages disappear after a short period.
Which of course is its Snapchat knockoff, because that's pretty much what they do now. They sort of like copycat these other social media services that are popular. Speaking of TikTok, though, very briefly, Jill, remember a few months ago when the government was telling us TikTok was like this massive national security risk? Yesterday was the deadline for TikTok to cease U.S. operations. The Commerce Department just saying it's not even going to bother enforcing the ban. So like that whole thing, I don't know what that was all about, but it effectively nobody really cares anymore.
Well, that's right. That's the frustrating
yeah.
thing.
Yeah, I mean, what was that? Like, was TikTok this serious national security risk, or did the president have some issue with it for some other reason? I don't know, but I did want to ask you, Jill, since we're talking about Instagram, how your Instagram diet is going. Dare I ask?
Like my regular diet, not well, Carlo. I basically live on Instagram, but I've been finding that I've been getting news on Instagram. I catch up with people. I think it's a healthier relationship.
Yeah, that's good. The key is to just the never-ending scroll is what you want to avoid on any of these things, right? Where you're just constantly just like not even paying attention and just scrolling. It's so bad. It's so bad. Oh, God.
We've also got ourselves a Super Bowl halftime headliner. The Weeknd will headline the Super Bowl halftime show. NFL, Pepsi, and Rock Nation announcing that the Grammy-winning R&B artist has been booked for a show that may look different from years past, depending on what the league decides to do about the pandemic. The big game is set for February 7th in Tampa.
Do you like him?
Sure. No, yeah, I do. I'm not like a huge Weeknd fan, but I like his music when I'm in the car.
The thing I always laugh about with The Weeknd is he wrote this song called "I Can't Feel My Face," which is a song about doing cocaine, and it was nominated for a Nickelodeon Kids' Choice Award. I just always think that that's so funny. But if you look at what the NFL has been doing with Super Bowl halftime performers, it's kind of a interesting backstory, right? They went from having pop stars back in the day, and then there was the Janet Jackson fiasco, and then they booked all these old-timey rock bands like Tom Petty,
right.
the Stones, Bruce Springsteen, because they're like pretty sure you don't have to worry about Bruce Springsteen, having a wardrobe malfunction. And now they've been sort of edging back into the pop star territory with Lady Gaga, Katy Perry, Madonna, Justin Timberlake. And now The Weeknd. So we'll see. But I think it is safe to say that the Super Bowl is going to be very strange this year, or next year, I guess, like everything else, though.
Yeah, look, at least they're planning for it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, let's end this week with a little bit of love-hate. One thing that we love, the first time that we wash our hair after getting it cut, it's like you can really feel the difference. Your hair is so fresh, so clean, so much shorter, so much healthier. I, of course, recently got my hair cut and when I couldn't wait for the first time I was going to wash it a couple days later. So that's what made me think of it. I don't know if it's the same thing with guys, but at least with girls, I love it.
It's definitely not. But I now I feel bad that I haven't commented because your hair looks great. Your hair looks really nice.
I wasn't looking for that, but thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, one thing that we hate, standing in line at any place of business behind a gaggle of teenagers who just got out of school. Do you know what I'm talking about here? Does this happen to you? Is this like a New York City thing? These kids are out of control in like the hour after high school ends. It's not. They're completely. They need to be completely reeled in. I know I sound like a total old man right now, but holding up the line is my biggest pet peeve in the world, and teenagers are far and away the worst offenders. So get off my lawn, kids.
All
Hold
right.
it together. Um, okay, and one thing that we ate this week, or drank in this case, whole milk. I'm really into whole milk right now. I feel like if you're going to drink milk, you just go for it. Like none of the skim,
Right.
1%. Just drink the whole milk. I've been getting whole milk because we have an espresso machine that we got for I think our as a wedding gift, and so I've been making us afternoon cappuccinos, and whole milk, as any barista knows, is the best to use for foam. So I've just been drinking it like by the glass all day, and I think I'm pretty lactose intolerant to begin with. So you're lucky you're
Oh,
not
poor
around.
Becky.
Exactly.
Well, that's good. Actually, my grandmother always used to say, my grandma D, she would say, if you're going to treat yourself to one thing, she would say, treat yourself to half and half in your coffee.
Oh yeah.
You're not using that much, but it makes such a difference. Like, get out of here with the skim milk and
Oh
everything else. Like,
yeah.
it's not going to work. And I would tend to agree. It makes a huge difference.
Half
It's
and
like a
coffee.
treat.
Right. Exactly. It is.
All right, we're gonna leave it there. Oh, I wanted to end on our retweet from the newsletter today because I thought it was so funny. It was from at Juicy Heidi. She writes, "Can you multitask? Yes, actually, I'm losing my mind and chilling at the same time.
That is exactly how I
Quite
feel these
accurate
days.
these days."
Oh.
All right, guys, that's what you need to know for Friday, November 13th.
All right, hang in there this weekend, guys. Get some rest. We'll see you next week.